Ariana pressed her face against the salt-streaked window of the old green bus as it pulled into Seabridge Cove. The town rolled out before her, a jumble of pastel-painted cottages, a modest waterfront lined with bobbing fishing boats, and the warm glow of a late afternoon sun dancing on the water surface. She tugged at the strap of her leather satchel, feeling an odd combination of excitement and trepidation in her chest. She was here to make a difference, to do what she had always dreamed of, though she couldn't quite shake the tiny voice in her head questioning whether she had the tenacity to change hearts and minds in a place where tradition ran so deep. She was greeted by a wall of humid coastal air when she stepped off the bus, the gulls overhead wheeling and crying out their welcome. Her official position as a newly minted marine biologist with the Oceanic Conservation Society had contributed to a swirl of pride and anxiety in her heart. This was her first independent assignment. She recalled the gentle handshake from her former professor, Dr. Porter, who had entrusted her with the mission of studying local sea turtle populations and ensuring their protection. "I've had trouble with declining numbers for years," he had told her. "The community there has its hands full. They could use someone with spirit, fresh ideas, and most importantly, hope." At the bus station stood a tall woman, possibly in her 50s, with sun-kissed skin and wide, friendly eyes. "Ariana, right?" she asked, holding up a simple sign with Ariana's name scrawled across it. "Welcome to Seabridge Cove. I'm Linda. We spoke on the phone last week." "Yes, wonderful to finally meet you," Ariana replied, relieved to see a face that seemed open to new ideas. Linda was the town librarian, part of a small coalition of locals who cared about preserving the local environment. She was also Ariana's first point of contact, someone who had volunteered to show her the ropes and give her a place to stay until she got settled. The drive to Linda's small bungalow took them along the main road that hugged the coastline. Astounding vistas appeared around each bend, colossal rocky cliffs, gentle coves, and the glimmering ocean that stretched out into seeming infinity. The thick scent of seaweed and salt served as a continuous reminder of the urgent need that had brought Ariana here. She couldn't wait to see the loggerhead and green sea turtle nesting grounds. Beneath her fascination lurked worry. Fewer hatchlings had survived in recent years, and no one was entirely sure why. She suspected factors like development on the beaches, overfishing, pollution, and climate change. Perhaps it was a complex mix of all of them. "I hear you're quite the turtle expert," Linda said as she pulled into the bungalow's driveway, her voice light yet hopeful. Ariana laughed softly. "I wouldn't call myself an expert yet. I've studied them extensively, but I'm hoping my fieldwork here will open new avenues for how we can protect them." Linda smiled. "Well, I'm glad you're here. The town can be slow to change, but there are also many people who care deeply. You'll find good allies if you look in the right places." Early the next morning, Ariana awoke to the sound of surf pounding on the shore. She dressed quickly in cargo shorts and a faded t-shirt. Linda had mentioned that the best time to explore potential nesting sites was dawn, just after the tide went out. With her notepad and camera in hand, Ariana followed a narrow trail down to the beach. The scene that greeted her was like a private miracle. Gulls taking flight against the sunrise, salmon-colored rays illuminating the soft sand, and the endless murmur of rolling waves. Searching for the barely visible tracks of sea turtles, Ariana walked slowly along the shore, scanning for evidence of nesting sites. She learned quickly that while some of the beaches looked pristine, others were littered with broken bottles, plastic wrappers, and even fishing nets washed ashore. She spotted a place where the sand looked slightly scratched and disturbed. A wave of excitement cascaded through her. Nesting activity. She crouched to examine the turtle tracks. They looked fresh, perhaps from the night before, meaning a female loggerhead must have dragged herself ashore to lay her eggs. But as Ariana followed the tracks closer to the high tide line, her heart sank. A piece of netting, likely fishing gear, was partially buried in the sand. Tangles of plastic net lay precariously near what might be a nest, threatening to suffocate it if it shifted or was carried inland by wind or water. She carefully removed and collected the offending gear, placing it in a separate bag for disposal. She used a small flag to mark the nest's location. A mother turtle had made an arduous journey to deposit her eggs here, trusting the elements in the same cycle that had occurred for centuries. Ariana felt a surge of responsibility to safeguard this delicate spark of life. Following Linda's advice, she headed to the local fisheries office, which was just off the dock. Fishermen came and went, discussing forecasts and daily hauls. An older man at the counter peered at her curiously. He had weather-beaten features, perhaps from decades at sea, and greeted her with a cautious nod. "You must be the new scientist," he said. "Name's Joseph. How can I help you?" Smiling, Ariana introduced herself. She asked if the fisherman had noticed any changes in turtle activity or had concerns about the local population. Joseph shrugged. "We see fewer turtles than we did in my youth, that's for sure. Some folks blame it on climate shift or pollution upstream. Others think it's just the cycle of nature. Not everyone's a fan of restricting fishing, either times are tough enough without new regulations breathing down our necks." Ariana recognized the complexity of the situation. People's livelihoods were at stake, and conservation efforts could feel like a threat to an already precarious economy. She explained her mission. "I'm not here to shut down the fisheries. I want to gather data, find solutions, maybe secure resources that could help both the fishermen and the environment, but I need the community's support." Joseph looked thoughtful. "Support can be earned," he said quietly. Then his expression softened. "I don't mean to sound distant. It's just that we've heard promises before. A bunch of talk, then no follow-through. You don't seem like the type to give up, though." "I won't," she said, holding his gaze. With a final handshake, she left the office, feeling a stirring of hope that the fisheries might eventually become partners in her cause. Over the ensuing weeks, Ariana threw herself into the process of mapping out and protecting nesting sites. She attended community meetings at the library that Linda organized. Her presentation slides illustrated the life cycle of the turtles, the threats they faced, and small steps everyone could take to help, like keeping beaches clean and turning off beachfront lights at night to avoid confusing hatchlings. She outlined how established conservation zones in other coastal towns had not only saved sea turtles, but also boosted ecotourism, bringing new business to locals. She insisted that thoughtful conservation wasn't an impediment, but rather a key to a brighter future. At first, only a handful of residents attended. Linda sat in the front row, beaming. An elderly couple who volunteered at the local nature reserve listened politely, nodding occasionally. A young father with his toddler perched on his lap asked timidly if he could help watch over a nest site. Despite the small turnout, Ariana was spurred on. It was the first sign that hearts were moving in the right direction. Her next meeting was at the school auditorium, this time focusing on hands-on activities for children. She showed the kids how to identify turtle footprints, helping them trace patterns on large sheets of paper. Their eyes grew wide with excitement as she described one day watching a clutch of hatchlings scurry towards the surf. She tirelessly explained that each tiny turtle faced tremendous odds, with only 1 in 1,000 making it to adulthood. A hush fell over the children at that revelation, and Ariana gently urged them to be that 1 in 1,000 who would care deeply and make a difference. The children cheered when she promised that, if conditions were right, she might invite them to witness the hatching of a nest at the end of summer. Momentum began to build. Slowly but surely, more townspeople came out to Ariana's beach walks on weekend mornings. They helped collect trash, remove debris, and document any turtle nests. Even some of the fishermen stopped by to ask questions, sharing knowledge about seasonal turtle sightings. There were still skeptics, of course, and Ariana learned how to listen to their concerns. She approached them with respect while standing firm in her commitment to protect the fragile creatures that had survived on this planet for millions of years. The sun was just coloring the horizon one dawn when Ariana arrived at a particular nest she had been monitoring meticulously. She had placed a small wire enclosure around it to safeguard it against predators and accidental foot traffic. This morning, the sand was slightly caved in, a telltale sign that hatching might be imminent. Her heart thumped with a mixture of expectancy and tenderness. Soon, Linda and the elderly volunteer couple joined her. They stood around, hushed, not wanting to disturb the miracle about to unfold. As the sun rose higher and bathed the landscape in gold, minute movements began in the sand. Then, almost imperceptibly, the first tiny head emerged, followed by a flurry of miniature flippers. One hatchling followed another in a chain reaction, all of them scrambling over each other, heading resolutely toward the luminous waterline. Ariana's breath caught in her throat. This was why she had dedicated her life to conservation. The intense fragility and determination of these tiny creatures struck her anew. The group watched quietly, holding their collective breath whenever a wave lapped up and momentarily disoriented the lead hatchlings. Again and again, the hatchlings continued unerringly, drawn by some ancient instinct into the ocean. By the time the last little straggler made its way past the foam, Ariana felt tears in her eyes. She blinked them away and turned to see Linda wiping her own cheeks. The elderly volunteers were no less emotional. "Thank you for bringing this magic to us," Linda whispered. Ariana could only nod. Buoyed by this success, Ariana wanted to follow up on a rumor she had heard that some beaches outside the main town area were in worse condition due to illegal dumping. If there were nesting along those stretches, the eggs could be imperiled. On a breezy Saturday, she and Linda drove out of town, following an overgrown dirt road beneath craggy pines. The path ended near a deserted strip of beach littered with rusted cans, old tires, and even fragments of broken furniture. The rancid smell of decay hung in the air. Ariana's heart sank. She recognized that any mother turtle who nested here must have done so unaware of the hazards that awaited her offspring. As she trudged along, her eyes scanned for any sign of nests. It wasn't long before she spotted shattered eggshells scattered near an old tire. She knelt to examine them, feeling a tightening in her chest. The eggs appeared to have been dug up prematurely, possibly by raccoons or foxes attracted by the garbage. She felt an overwhelming sense of anger and sadness, but anger would not solve the problem. Only collective action could. She resolved then and there to push the town council to clean up all the beaches and enforce anti-dumping regulations. Lives, both human and marine, were at stake. That evening, she attended the monthly council meeting. Members of the local government had gathered in a small building that doubled as a community center. The panel of council members sat behind a long table, and a small audience was scattered across folding chairs. Ariana signed up to speak, along with Linda and several other concerned citizens. One by one, they presented photographs, data, and heartfelt pleas for stricter dumping regulations and improved waste management. A few members of the council listened earnestly, while others seemed apathetic or burdened by budget constraints and political ties. A middle-aged council member named Bryce, a tall man with a meticulously trimmed mustache, listened to Ariana's presentation with a guarded expression. I don't think anyone here is opposed to saving turtles," he said in a cautious tone, "but we have to look at the bigger picture. The cost of cleaning up neglected beaches might be high, and we have limited funds. Not to mention, local businesses, fisheries, tourist spots are already treading water." Ariana understood the challenge. "I've researched grants," she responded. "We could apply for environmental aid from the state or even private organizations. If we show that we're serious, we're likely to receive support. Yes, it will require effort, but these problems will only worsen if we do nothing." Meanwhile, the potential for ecotourism could invigorate Seabridge Cove. People travel miles just to see nesting sea turtles. If we invest in making our environment healthier, everyone benefits. Bryce nodded, but his face remained uncertain. It was another step in what she knew would be many steps. Still, she pressed forward, passing around printouts of possible funding opportunities. Linda spoke of the library's plan to host more educational workshops. Another local, a fisherman named Ricardo, added that a clean environment would improve the quality of fish stocks, boosting the industry. By the time the meeting adjourned, more than a few participants were buzzing with fresh ideas. Ariana sensed the winds of change stirring, if only slightly. As the summer wound on, Ariana and her growing team of volunteers organized beach cleanup events. It started small, with maybe half a dozen dedicated people pulling trash from the sand, while Ariana documented potential nest sites. Then, one weekend, Joseph, the fisheries manager, surprised everyone by showing up in work gloves and a baseball cap. He was accompanied by four of his fishing buddies, and together they collected 3 truckloads of debris. Word spread, and more people started pitching in. Before long, the entire town seemed to be lifting old tires, disposing of plastic, and bagging trash. Curious children scurried between the adults, proud to show off the plastic bottles or scraps they salvaged. Ariana saw an even bigger change happening. Neighbors who seldom chatted were now talking about local wildlife, discussing how best to get rid of trash, and high-fiving each other whenever they discovered a potential nest. A local cafe offered discounts on coffee to volunteers. The library set up a display of books about marine life, climate change, and conservation. The once sleepy cove was abuzz with doers. Ariana felt an immense warmth bloom in her chest whenever she caught sight of a new volunteer or overheard the excited chatter about helping the turtles. Still, the real challenge came when Ariana found evidence of turtle strandings, places where, for various reasons, juvenile turtles would end up washed ashore, stunned or ill. She and the volunteer team coordinated with a regional marine rescue center, turning Linda's garage into a makeshift triage area, and across a few intense weeks, they saved multiple young turtles by administering fluids, removing hooks, and carefully transporting them to professional rehabilitators when necessary. Those frantic rescue scenes brought out empathy from even the gruffest old fishermen. Ariana knew that every single turtle rescued symbolized a broader healing process. The entire town was increasingly united behind the idea of respecting marine life. Summer edged toward autumn, and with it came the promise of cooler days. One crisp morning, Seabridge Cove's residents received spectacular news. Ariana's grant applications for environmental cleanup and turtle conservation had been approved. Additional funds would be coming in to be used for better waste disposal systems, beach restoration, and the creation of interpretive signs to educate visitors. To celebrate, the town organized what they called Turtle Day, an outdoor fair by the waterfront. Booths offered educational materials, local artisans sold sea-themed crafts, and the kids put on a mini play about sea turtles journeying across the ocean. Music played well into the evening, and the atmosphere was downright jubilant. Ariana, who stood in the center of it all, found herself nearly overwhelmed by gratitude. She recognized how far the community had come in just a few short months. All around her, folks discussed the changes they wanted to continue making, everything from reducing single-use plastics to hosting annual turtle watching events. Standing by the dock, gazing at the clusters of families and friends who had come together, Ariana thought of how she initially worried she might be ignored or dismissed. Instead, her determination had sparked something in the people here. Everyone realized that a cleaner ocean and safer beaches were part of a long-term investment in the town's future. The turtles had become a symbol of hope, perseverance, and collective responsibility. Then there was Joseph, who approached Ariana with a wide smile she had never before seen on his weathered face. He removed his cap and scratched his balding head, looking almost shy. "We've been pulling up some interesting stuff in the nets lately," he said. "Last week, I found a sea turtle stuck in some old netting, but we cut it free. Didn't think twice about it. I guess I wanted to thank you for showing me there's another way. One that might just keep this place thriving, if we're careful." His words weightier with emotion than Ariana expected, she replied, "Thank you for stepping up. I don't think we could have done this without the fishing community's help." They shook hands, a gesture that felt like the sealing of a pact. As the final echo of music drifted across the silent water that evening, Ariana took a moment to sit on a bench by the dock, legs feeling pleasantly weary from the day's excitement. She gazed at the moonlit sea, her mind steeped in wonder. So many of the hatchlings that had made their way into these waters might one day return here. Guided by an internal compass, scientists still struggled to fully understand. In that sense, each nest represented not just a single generation, but a continuing cycle that had endured through millennia. Now, with the town mobilized in their defense, Ariana envisioned a future where the turtles would find safe harbor year after year. Not even a week later, Linda left a note on Ariana's bedroom door before sunrise. "Meet me on Crescent Beach." Ariana quickly grabbed her gear and hurried down the coast, her bare feet sinking into the still cool morning sand. She found Linda standing with a few townsfolk near a newly flagged nest, their eyes transfixed on the sand surface. Another wave of hatching was beginning, a late clutch from a mother turtle who had chosen this protected spot. Ariana noticed children among the group, including a handful from the school. They stepped close but remained quiet, their tiny faces wrapped with anticipation. One by one, small heads popped up, glistening in dawn's rays. A collective gasp of awe rose. The little turtles wriggled free, flippers churning as they made their improbable journey toward the rolling surf. The entire group formed a respectful circle, giving the hatchlings enough space. When the last one disappeared into the water, the children broke into applause, and a couple started cheering. The adults quickly joined them. Some of the kids were jumping up and down, pointing excitedly at the retreating waves. Ariana thought back to her childhood, to how she, too, had once watched her first hatchlings with her parents during a beach camping trip. That moment had defined her path in life, instilling in her a reverence for all living creatures. Now, seeing these local children share in that wonder, she felt certain that seeds of compassion were being planted in their young heart, seeds that might sprout into the next generation of scientists, conservationists, or simply mindful citizens. The memory of the deserted beach and disheartened pleas at the council meeting seemed distant now. In their place stood new routines, weekly beach patrols, communal trash cleanups, and an expanded sense of unity. Even the lights along the shorefront had been adjusted, dimmed after midnight so the turtles wouldn't become disoriented when they hatched or returned to nest. Progress, Ariana realized, was often small steps accumulating into something bigger than any single person. Here in Seabridge Cove, even the cynics appeared to have softened, recognizing that when the environment thrived, so did the community. Standing on the beach that morning, Linda rested an arm around Ariana's shoulders. "Look how happy everyone is," Linda marveled. "This never would have happened without your dedication." Ariana shook her head, though her eyes glimmered with tears of happiness. "Honestly, I just lit a spark. All of you carried it forward." She glanced at the water, imagining the frantic splashes of baby turtles out beyond the breakers, discovering their ocean home for the first time. "I learned a lot about resilience from them. They face unthinkable odds, but they keep going anyway." Linda gave her shoulder a squeeze. "Isn't that what we're doing? Continuing to move forward, no matter the odds?" Ariana nodded, a sense of purpose filling her. She knew that her time at Seabridge Cove might not last forever. Sooner or later, another assignment would come calling, but the imprint of this little coastal town, its people, and the gentle creatures she had come to save would remain with her. And she took heart in knowing she had left behind a community prepared to carry on the fight for conservation. Clutch by clutch, nest by nest, they would continue saving the sea turtles, and in so doing, preserve a vital, beautiful part of their own heritage. She and Linda walked arm in arm up the sandy path, joined by a gathering of neighbors who hummed with excitement and optimism. The early sunlight warmed their backs. Up ahead, the simple houses and small shops of Seabridge Cove glowed in the golden morning. In their own quiet way, the turtles had connected the town to its best self, unveiling the power they shared to protect and cherish the place they all called home.